Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching and learning in Indiana and around the world. More at education.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber, the Giga City Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Indiana University Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of over 650,000 alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, travel, and advocacy. alumni.iu.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, an update to our ongoing newsroom investigation into the Utilities District of Western Indiana. New allegations claim the former CEO of the company took millions from the electric utility for his own personal gain. Some kids are ending up in the Department of Correction without ever having an attorney.
Since we started doing these orientations and interviews last April, we've had 7 kids who made it all the way to the Department of Correction without having an attorney.
It's a nationwide problem some Indiana attorneys are trying to address. A rural Indiana town is celebrating the opening of an expanded LGBTQ community center.
They don't have access to a lot of resources. So we are the resource.
Ahead, we take you on a tour and show you how the center plans to continue to build on its service to the community. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The Utilities District of Western Indiana is suing its former CEO, Brian Sparks, saying he abused his position and put his own interest above those of the electric co-op. My colleague, Sarah Whitmire, has been investigating the rural electric company for more than a year now and joins us from the newsroom with this update.
Up until now, the board and the management of UDWI hasn't said much about CEO Brian Sparks since he was fired this summer. The board reneged on a promise to release phase 1 of an audit that detailed personnel issues within the co-op. Now, they did release phase 2, and that had a bunch of recommendations about procedural changes in the co-op. And you could read between the lines because they recommended things about better accounting of finances, who should be signing for checks. But this week's countersuit, which was in direct response to the suit that Sparks filed in December, really details some of the allegations of money mismanagement in the co-op.
For example, the complaint claims Sparks spent tens of thousands of dollars on sporting tickets for himself and his family. It goes on to say he used his corporate credit card for tens of thousands of dollars in personal expenses, and wrote checks made out to cash for more than $60,000, allegedly for personal reasons. The electric co-op donates a lot of money. It's supposed to be used to support charitable causes or nonprofit organizations. The suit alleges that over a 10-year period, Sparks coded more than well over $1 million for donations that in reality were being used for his personal benefit and business not related to the electric co-op. We began investigating claims of money mismanagement at the co-op more than a year ago. UDWI serves 11 counties in the central and western part of the state, including large swaths of Greene, Monroe, Lawrence, Owen, and Clay counties. It's about 19,000 customers. They were paying the highest electricity rate in the state, and they were in the top 10 in the Midwest. We uncovered that just about half of the money UDWI was charging customers was actually going towards the purchase of actual energy. UDWI is a not-for-profit. We asked Sparks last spring where all the money was going.
If I get a bill in the mail here, what percentage of that, if you were able to break it down, what percentage of that would be used to actually purchase the energy from Hoosier Energy?
About anywhere from currently anywhere from 50, maybe 53 to 60%.
Of that is going towards the actual cost of energy. Okay, so then the other
is going to make the improvements and everything necessary to keep the cooperative running.
In its counterclaim, UDWI is asking for an award for damages, including reimbursement of attorney's fees and the cost of an internal investigation into Sparks' action. In Sparks' original suit, he says he did not engage in any fraudulent activity and accuses UDWI of breach of contract and unpaid wages.
And Joe, as these suits make their way through the court system, there's still that ongoing FBI investigation. We know the FBI is looking into the finances of the co-op, but any additional details haven't been released yet.
All right, thank you, Sarah. The Bloomington Police Department is facing pushback after it announced plans to purchase an armored vehicle. The police say it will protect them against powerful firearms, but some residents say the purchase is unnecessary. Barbara Brosier has more.
Dozens of residents attended a meeting this week to learn more about the Bloomington Police Department's newest addition to the force, a bulletproof vehicle called a Bearcat. Police say it's necessary to protect against AK-15s and AK-47s, and only the Critical Incident Response Team will use the vehicle.
I know there's a lot of distrust of police, but I can never see an incident where we have a protest downtown that we're going to roll this vehicle out to use it. It will not rise to the level of following our policies and following the matrix to deploy our CERT team.
But some residents voiced concerns about what they call a militarization of the police department.
I find it disappointing that we waited so long to actually have this dialogue. Bloomington's a progressive town, so you would think that it would give our elected officials some type of hesitancy before they authorize a normal vehicle.
Bloomington had access to another armored vehicle for more than a decade, but they retired it in 2012 because it needed a lot of repairs. Resident Steve Scott says he supports the purchase and trusts the police department will only use the vehicle when absolutely necessary.
This is not an offensive vehicle. It's a defensive vehicle. It's going to keep them from getting shot at by the large number of guns that seem to be awash in this county.
The department will pay about $250,000 for the Bearcat using money from the public safety local income tax.
So that meeting with the police department, the city, and residents was Tuesday. Last night, Bloomington's mayor was scheduled to give his annual State of the City address, but protesters angry over the city's purchase of the armored police vehicle disrupted his address and ultimately shut it down. A local Black Lives Matter group disrupted the address as the mayor talked about an armored vehicle police will start using this summer.
I will make decisions that I believe are in the best interest of our community. John. And I will make mistakes.
I'm sorry. You know what? You knew you were going to come here tonight and put in the whole council. Now's the time to confess it.
Hamilton asked to proceed with his remarks, but 12 minutes of debate and shouting continued until recess was called. Police Chief Mike Dekoff, along with others, tried to convince the protesters to restore order and continue the address. But as Hamilton tried to start again, the protesters became louder and Hamilton had to adjourn. The protest was part of a Facebook event called Black Lives Matter Disrupts the State. It called to stop the ongoing militarization of local police departments. In particular, the city's $250,000 purchase of an armored police vehicle without public notification. Black Lives Matter Bloomington organizer Vox Booker says sitting outside with signs isn't enough to catch the attention of public officials.
This disrupts that process. It's something that's near and dear to the mayor. He tends to like these speeches, and it creates that uncomfortability in people that is going to continue to have people have a dialogue on this.
Hamilton says he understands people have different views and it's appropriate to express them in the proper forum.
It's unfortunate that a large public meeting was hijacked by a few people with some electronic assistance, but we'll continue to do the good work. I'm proud of what's happening in Bloomington, and we'll continue the discussion about any issue anybody wants to talk about.
Now for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brosier, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. The Republican leader of the Indiana Senate says he plans to step down from the legislature. Senate President Pro Tem David Long of Fort Wayne has been the Senate's leader since 2006 and was first elected to the chamber 22 years ago. His resignation will take effect in November. Well, you might be able to buy carry-out alcohol on Sundays sooner rather than later. Lawmakers are considering a bill to lift the ban and legalize Sunday sales between noon and 8 p.m. Now, originally the change would have taken effect on July 1st. An amendment lawmakers approved this week, though, would make it effective immediately if the governor signs the bill into law. State Senator Eddie Melton says he wants to create a special legislative commission to investigate the Department of Child Services. An independent consultant's review of DCS is underway and expected to conclude in June. There's also a pre-existing state panel, the Commission on Improving the Status of Children, that looks at DCS. Melton says he doesn't want his proposed committee to duplicate those efforts, but still thinks it's necessary.
Well, I've had a few Republican senators agree with me that legislators should be engaged and involved in this process. And I think the way we designed this in the Senate resolution will provide us with that vehicle, that opportunity to be a part of the process every step of the way, figuring out what barriers may exist that need to be addressed through policy.
A Senate panel will vote later this month on Melton's recommendation to create the special committee. A Senate committee plans to vote next week on legislation to regulate short-term rentals, such as Airbnb. The measure prohibits local governments from banning short-term rentals. It does allow locals to require permits for those who use platforms such as Airbnb. Municipalities can charge a permit fee of up to $150, but it's silent on how often local units can charge that fee.
If I lose that permit and I then come back and reapply in the time allowed, then I have to pay the $150 again.
Rental owners can lose their permit if they incur 3 or more citations from local governments. A judge says the owners of wildlife in need in southern Indiana cannot use tiger cubs for public encounters. A judge issued an injunction this week that temporarily bans Tim and Melissa Stark from hosting events where visitors can interact with tiger cubs. The ruling also bans the Starks from declawing their big cats and orders them to stop separating cubs from their mothers unless medically necessary.
It has ruined my life. I mean, it has literally. It stresses you so bad you can't sleep. You know, I'm up half the night, like I'm up all the time anyway. But you wake up, every second you're awake, all you're doing is thinking of strategy, thinking of this, you know, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? I live for these animals. It's that simple. I donate my time 24/7, 365 days a year to this. I've done that since 1997. I don't receive a paycheck in any way, shape, or form.
The decision follows a lawsuit PETA filed last year, alleging the Starks have repeatedly violated federal law that protects endangered species. While the ban is temporary, PETA issued a statement following the court's decision, saying it, quote, looks forward to seeing the Starks permanently forbidden from mutilating, exploiting, and profiting off baby animals. Meanwhile, Tim Stark says he hasn't violated the Animal Welfare Act or the animal welfare regulations set by the USDA. Indiana can move forward with lethal injections following a state Supreme Court ruling sanctioning the use of a new lethal injection drug cocktail. The Department of Correction chose a new lethal injection drug cocktail in 2014, a combination never before used in this country. Death row inmate Roy Ward brought the suit, arguing the DOC should have used an administrative rulemaking process required by state law and open to public comment. And since it didn't, Ward said the state couldn't use the drug. The Supreme Court, however, says the decision to use a new drug cocktail didn't create a new rule, so a public process wasn't required. And in another Indiana Supreme Court ruling, judges say Lake Michigan's shoreline is open to all. In a landmark decision this week, the court decided adjacent property owners can exercise exclusive control of the beach between their homes and the water. The ruling sets the ordinary high water mark as the boundary between the state-owned land under the lake and the interests of the property owners. Joe, those shores look pretty nice. It's going to be a while, though, before we make it to Lake Michigan for a swim.
Thanks, Barbara. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Some kids are going to prison for incidents that adults wouldn't be punished for. Ahead, a report on issues in the juvenile justice system and an effort by some attorneys to help kids who are slipping through the cracks. And a rural community is stepping up its efforts to support members of the LGBTQ community. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
$10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18 fine.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Some kids making their way through Indiana's juvenile justice system are slipping through the cracks. They're supposed to get a public defender to help with their cases, but that doesn't always happen. Reporter Barbara Brozier is here with more. And Barbara, what does that mean for the kids?
Well, Joe, some kids are ending up in the Department of Correction when they shouldn't. And sometimes it's for an incident an adult would never serve prison time for. It's a problem states across the country are facing because of a lack of resources and understanding of juvenile courts and crimes. Some Indiana attorneys, though, are trying to change the trend.
I'm here to help if you guys need help, most definitely.
Joel Wenicky is standing in front of a classroom at Logansport Juvenile Correctional Facility. He's talking to a group of boys who arrived here within the past week. They range in age from 12 to 17 and sport the same shaved heads and gray sweatsuits.
So right now is what we're going to do is we're going to talk as a group, but you guys got to raise your hand if you want to talk to me, okay? And we're going to try to figure out what you guys know about the system it is that you just went through, how it is that you came to be here at the DOC.
Wenicky isn't a teacher, but an attorney with the Indiana Public Defender Council's Juvenile Defense Project. The group developed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Correction to let attorneys visit 2 juvenile facilities in the state every other week. Wenicky drives more than 4 hours round trip to make sure the kids who are serving time in the DOC had proper legal representation.
It sounds like everybody in the room had an attorney, right? Because that's one of the things that I want to find out and make sure that you guys know and understand that you had an attorney. I've met with 7 kids so far since last April who made it all the way here and didn't have an attorney, at least at some point in their case, when they probably should have.
It's hard to gauge how often that's happening in Indiana because there's little statewide data available on juvenile defense. The state itself collects little information on kids who go through court or end up in the DOC. What we do know from judicial service reports is that about a quarter of juveniles waived their right to counsel in 2015. The National Juvenile Defender Center worked with state task forces to complete an assessment of Indiana's system, but that happened more than a decade ago. The analysis took information from 11 of Indiana's 92 counties and points to issues with how and when attorneys are appointed to juvenile cases, and the high number of kids waiving their right to an attorney. What Wenicky knows from his visits to Logansport is that some of those problems still persist.
They show up at the Department of Correction oftentimes not knowing and understanding things that they should understand having gone through that process.
Wenicky has no shortage of stories about kids who ended up in the DOC when they probably shouldn't have. He estimates about 45% of the boys who sit through the group orientation request to meet with him one-on-one because they have questions about their situations. Wenicky skims their case files quickly before they have a private meeting.
I talked to a young man not too long ago who, after sitting through orientation, he wanted to meet with me one-on-one, and he came in and he said, I don't think I had an attorney. And so we had to talk through who were the people in the courtroom, and the only thing he could say was the person in a suit with all the paperwork was sitting at another table.
There's a long list of similar stories, like the girl who lied to a police officer about her name, which would carry a maximum penalty of about 180 days for an adult.
She's been under court supervision for that offense for 3 years, had multiple probation violations for things such as skipping school, but that it's kind of hard to see that that should be the hook, a B misdemeanor, to keep court supervision over her for 3 full years.
Based on conversations like that, Wenicky connects some kids with an appellate attorney or the state public defender's office. His colleague goes through a similar process at another juvenile facility.
So we've had about over 400 kids go through the orientation. About 40% sign up to talk to us. And then out of that, about 10% we've referred on for appeals.
The facility visits are just a portion of Indiana's plan for improving juvenile defense. Attorneys are also going to counties to help them reform the way they deliver juvenile justice. And there's an effort to give attorneys more juvenile-specific training.
By the time the grant's over, we hope to have at least done training for attorneys in every single county.
But access to quality counsel isn't a problem unique to Indiana. It's happening across the country. The National Juvenile Defender Center says the practice of automatically appointing young people an attorney hasn't caught on everywhere.
67% of the states that we've been in, young people were not always waiving their right to counsel, but at least in some places were appearing at proceedings where their liberty interests were clearly at stake. Detention hearings, adjudication hearings, disposition hearings, without attorneys at their side.
Scally says the problem is systematic, and the lack of funding and consistency in Indiana only compounds it.
You look at the fact that there's no state-level entity that provides leadership, oversight, monitoring. There's no mandatory standards for counties to comply with that demand that young people get quality juvenile defense.
That's in the back of Wenicky's mind as he talks to these kids. Federal grant money supporting this program runs out next year, so he'll have to make his case to state legislators to support the program. He says there's evidence to show their efforts are working. The DOC released a couple of kids early after he discovered they shouldn't be there. But they're only dealing with a small number of the thousands of juvenile cases in Indiana.
We're trying to reach out to residential placements and secure detention facilities, which is a step down from the Department of Correction, to encourage them to get kids in touch with us who may have an issue, but we just can't, travel around and do this same orientation interview process at those facilities. It would take too much time.
The Indiana Supreme Court did come up with some funding that will help cover any gaps between when the federal grant runs out and when attorneys can make their case to state legislators for money.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara. Spencer Pride is celebrating the opening of its new LGBTQ community center. It's right on the town square in Spencer. The new building is 9 times larger than the group's previous location.
While this is a very conservative community, it's also a community of live and let live. It's also a community of LGBTQ people.
There's a retail store in the building featuring local artist work along with LGBTQ merchandise, but Epp says one of the most exciting areas of the new building is the gathering place that offers seating areas and LGBTQ resources. There are plans to continue renovating the space in the future. Epp says in 2019 they plan to remodel the second floor and eventually add LGBTQ-friendly apartments and offices. In today's political climate, Richard Lugar and Lee Hamilton are encouraging citizens to practice civility and spread civil discourse throughout communities and across society. The two participated in a panel just recently at DePaul University.
It's incumbent upon us to try to elect leaders, starting with our own city councils, quite apart from our state officials and our national officials, who at least have exercised civility in the way they conduct themselves, their lives, as well as their civil discourse.
just think of your friends. You don't deserve a star in your crown because you're nice to your friends. What's hard is to be civil to somebody who hates your guts. That's the test.
The two encouraged citizens to do the research and elect the proper officials into offices that could improve the quality of the nation's civility. And Columbus will take center stage this year at the state's annual Preservation Conference. A different community hosts the event each year, but this is a first for Columbus. This year's conference will explore how to preserve landscapes and celebrate modernist landmarks. Columbus is known for its mid-century modern architecture. During the conference, there will be events and tours of some of Columbus's most noteworthy properties. And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching and learning in Indiana and around the world. More at education.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Indiana University Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of over 650,000 alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, travel, and advocacy. Alumni.iu.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.